The alien vessel tore through the upper atmosphere, a spear of fire against the Arctic night. Its sleek, obsidian hull shimmered with alien symbols as it slowed its descent, scattering ice and snow as it landed in a secluded corner of Alaska's vast wilderness. Inside, Commander Zrath stood with his Talon hands clasped behind his back, his reptilian eyes fixed on the holographic display projecting the planet's surface. "This world reeks of weakness," he said, his voice a guttural growl that resonated through the control room. Around him, his crew of Vraxian hunters shifted in anticipation. The air was thick with the acrid scent of their battle pheromones, a signal of their collective bloodlust. "Primitive creatures," Lieutenant Groff muttered, his mandibles clicking as he adjusted his energy rifle. "They are unworthy of the hunt." Zrath turned to his second-in-command, his scaled face unreadable. "Weak prey offers no glory, Groff, but it will serve as training for the younglings back home." His gaze returned to the display, zooming in on the faint heat signatures of life scattered across the snow-covered expanse. "Humans, the apex predators of this planet. We will show them what it means to face the Vraxian elite." A low hum reverberated through the ship as its AI, a cold, detached voice, chimed in. "Environmental conditions are extreme. Prolonged exposure may impair mobility and effectiveness." Groff snorted. "Their weather is as fragile as they are." Zrath silenced him with a raised claw. "Do not underestimate the wilds of any world, Groff. Nature can be as lethal as any foe." Yet even as he spoke, the commander's arrogance remained unchecked. In his mind, nothing on this planet could rival the prowess of the Vraxian hunters. The ship's landing ramp hissed open, revealing a blinding wall of snow and wind. Zrath was the first to step out, his towering form silhouetted against the storm. The cold bit at his armor, and frost began to creep along the edges of his weapon, but he pressed on without hesitation. Behind him, Groth and the rest of the hunting party fanned out, their cloaking devices shimmering to life. The Vraxians moved silently through the forest, their thermal vision piercing the whiteout conditions. Tracks in the snow led them toward their first target, a solitary human, moving cautiously through the woods. The hunter, Jake, was bundled in heavy furs, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He was unaware of the predators stalking him, his focus on the trail of a caribou he had been tracking. Zrath signaled for his team to fan out, encircling the human. Groff moved to take the kill, his weapon raised, but Zrath held up a claw to stop him. "Wait, I want to see how it reacts." As Groff begrudgingly lowered his rifle, a branch snapped under one of the younger Vraxian's feet. Jake froze, his head jerking up as his instincts flared. He turned, his eyes scanning the tree-line. There was nothing to see, just the swirling snow and the dark silhouettes of trees. Yet something felt wrong. His fingers tightened on his rifle. Zrath watched with mild amusement as the human backed away slowly, his breath visible in the freezing air. The commander nodded to Groff. "Now?" Groff's rifle discharged a bolt of crackling energy, searing through the air where Jake had stood a moment before. The hunter had thrown himself to the ground, rolling behind a fallen log for cover. Another bolt hit the snow near his feet, sending up a spray of ice. Jake fired back blindly, the crack of his gun startling in the otherwise silent forest. The Vraxians hesitated, and used a prey that fought back so aggressively. Zrath barked an order, and the hunters surged forward, confident their superior technology would end the confrontation swiftly. But Jake was no easy target. He moved with practiced efficiency, using the terrain to his advantage. When a Vraxian charged him head-on, Jake's shot hit true, the alien collapsing in a spray of green blood. Zratha's amusement turned to irritation. "Groff, finish this." But before Groff could close the distance, Jake vanished into the forest, his tracks quickly obscured by the falling snow. The Vraxians gave chase, their thermal vision scanning for any sign of him. Yet Jake seemed to meld into the landscape, evading their every attempt to corner him. When they finally regrouped, empty-handed and humiliated, Zratha's expression was one of barely restrained fury. One human has outmaneuvered an elite hunting squad, he growled. Pathetic. Groff bristled at the insult but said nothing, his pride stinging from the failure. Perhaps this prey is more cunning than we anticipated, he admitted grudgingly. Zrath turned to the forest, his eyes narrowing. Cunning will not save them. This is only the beginning. We will show these creatures the true meaning of fear. Unseen by the Vraxians, Jake watched from a ridge above, his breath slow and measured. He had seen enough to know these weren't ordinary hunters. Their weapons, their appearance, none of it was human. He tightened his grip on his rifle, his mind racing. He had to warn the others. Back in the alien ship, the AI reported the squad's failure with clinical detachment. Casualty recorded. Suggest reassessment of prey classification. Zrath waved the report away. No need. We will adapt. Humans may have instincts, but we have superior intellect and firepower. The hunt continues. As the Vraxians retreated into the storm to regroup, the Alaskan wilderness closed in around them, its silence as ominous as the predator they had come to hunt. Yet the land itself seemed to mock their arrogance, its biting cold and relentless winds reminding them that Earth was not theirs to conquer. For the first time in his long career, Zrath felt a flicker of doubt. It was a feeling he quickly buried, but it lingered, gnawing at the edges of his confidence. He would not admit it, not yet, but something about this hunt felt different. And somewhere in the distance, Jake moved with quiet determination, heading toward the cabin where his friends waited. The storm was thickening, but so was his resolve. Whatever those things were, they had made one critical mistake. They had come to Alaska in the winter, and in Alaska, the winter hunted everyone. Jake burst into the cabin, his breath visible in the freezing air, a mix of adrenaline and exhaustion coursing through him. The wooden interior was lit dimly by a crackling fire, the warmth a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. Ethan, the oldest of the group, and a man whose every movement spoke of military precision, looked up sharply from where he was sharpening a knife. Beside him, Connor fiddled with the inner workings of a snowmobile engine, grease staining his fingers. Logan, ever the quiet one, was meticulously cleaning a row of steel traps by the window. "They're not human," Jake said, his voice steady but low, like a storm held at bay. The others paused, exchanging glances before Ethan stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. "Explain," Ethan said, his voice as sharp as the blade in his hand. Jake locked the door behind him and stepped closer to the fire, his rifle still clutched tightly. "I was out by the northern ridge, tracking caribou. Something found me first. I don't know what they are, but they're not from here. Taller than us, stronger. Their weapons, energy-based, like nothing I've ever seen. One of them fired at me. Another tried to flank me, but I got one of them." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "Green blood." Connor set down his tools, his brow furrowing. "Aliens?" he asked, half in disbelief. Logan didn't speak but stood silently, his hand drifting to the hunting knife strapped to his belt. Ethan nodded slowly, processing. "How many?" "5, maybe more," Jake replied. "They're organized, military trained, from what I could tell. But they're not used to this terrain. They couldn't track me in the snow." For a moment, the cabin fell silent, the only sound the wind howling against the wooden walls. Then Ethan spoke, his voice calm but carrying an edge of resolve. "If they're hunting us, we don't have the luxury of sitting around waiting for them to come knocking. We strike first." Connor raised an eyebrow. "You're saying we take the fight to them? Against aliens with energy rifles and God knows what else?" Ethan's gaze was steady. "They're not invincible. Jake killed one. They can bleed, and they can die. If they're underestimating us, that's our advantage. They don't know this land like we do." Jake nodded. "They're struggling with the cold. You could see it in the way they moved. It's slowing them down." Logan finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "We've got the terrain, traps, the cold. If they came here to hunt, they're about to learn what it's like to be hunted. Ethan turned to Connor. What can you rig up with what we've got? Connor glanced around the room, his mind already working. Depends. If we can salvage anything off the one Jake took down, I might be able to rig an EMP or scramble their comms. Beyond that, we've got the snowmobiles, propane tanks, and the traps Logan's been working on. It's not much, but it'll have to do. Ethan nodded. Then let's move. We don't know how much time we have before they regroup. The group packed quickly, their movements efficient and practiced. Logan strapped a series of steel traps to his pack, while Jake refilled his ammunition. Ethan outlined their plan with the clarity of a man who had seen combat before, his voice calm but commanding. We draw them into the woods, set traps to slow them down. Connor and I will take high ground near the ridge with rifles. Jake, Logan, you work the forest floor. Force them into a kill zone. The storm had eased slightly as they stepped out into the night, but the cold was sharper, the air biting at any exposed skin. The forest stretched out before them, a labyrinth of snow-laden trees and shifting shadows. It was a hunter's playground, and they intended to use every inch of it. Hours passed as the group worked in near silence, laying their traps and fortifying their positions. Logan, moving with the ease of someone who had lived his entire life in the wild, set snares and tripwires with meticulous care. Jake scouted ahead, his sharp eyes scanning for any signs of movement. Ethan and Connor rigged a propane tank with a makeshift detonator, burying it under a thin layer of snow at the base of the ridge. The first sign of the Vraxians came just before dawn, a faint shimmer in the air, almost imperceptible against the snow. Logan, crouched behind a fallen tree, spotted it first. He signaled to Jake, who raised his rifle and waited, his breathing steady. The shimmer grew closer, resolving into the hulking figure of a Vraxian, its cloaking device flickering in the cold. Logan waited until the alien was within range, then triggered the trap. A steel bear trap snapped shut around the Vraxian's leg with a sickening crunch. The alien roared in pain, its cloaking field collapsing as it thrashed against the trap. Jake didn't hesitate, his shot hitting the creature square in the chest. It collapsed, its blood steaming against the snow. The roar alerted the others. From the ridge, Ethan and Connor opened fire, their rifles cracking through the dawn. Another Vraxian fell, its energy rifle discharging wildly as it hit the ground. The remaining aliens scattered, their shimmering forms darting between the trees. The humans pressed their advantage. Logan and Jake drove the Vraxians deeper into the forest, herding them toward the ridge where Ethan and Connor waited. The propane trap detonated with a deafening boom, sending snow and debris flying. 2 more Vraxians fell, their bodies charred and broken. But the aliens weren't done yet. From the chaos, Commander Wrath emerged, his armor scorched but intact. He roared, his energy rifle spitting deadly bolts of light. Logan dug behind a tree, the energy scorching the bark where he had just been standing. Jake fired back, his shot grazing Wrath's shoulder. Ethan barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. Fall back to the next position. Don't let them regroup. The humans retreated in an organized fashion, luring the surviving Vraxians deeper into their trap-laden territory. The forest was their ally, each step of the aliens hindered by the snow and the humans' ingenuity. Yet the fight was far from over. By the time the sun fully rose, the humans had thinned the alien ranks, but at a cost. Logan's traps were nearly spent, and Connor's improvised devices were running low. They regrouped at a small clearing, their breaths heavy but their resolve unbroken. Ethan spoke first, his voice calm but firm. We've hit them hard, but Wrath is still out there. He's not going to stop until one of us is dead. Jake nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. Then we make sure it's him. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, the storm clouds gathering once more. They had won the first round, but the battle was far from over. As they prepared for the next assault, one thought lingered in each of their minds. They were no longer just surviving. They were fighting back. The forest was eerily silent now, the earlier chaos of gunfire and explosions replaced by the suffocating stillness of winter. Snow fell softly, blanketing the blood-streaked battlefield where the Vraxians had fallen. Jake crouched behind a tree, his sharp eyes scanning the tree-line for movement. The cold gnawed at his exposed face, but he didn't care. His hands, steady as ever, gripped his rifle like a lifeline. "They're regrouping," Ethan whispered over the crackling radio. He was positioned higher on the ridge, his vantage point giving him a clear view of the battlefield. His calm, measured tone betrayed no hint of fear. 2, maybe 3 left. Zrath is leading them. Connor's voice came through next, edged with frustration. "Their leader's smart. He's using their tech to disrupt our signals. Every time I try to triangulate their position, it scrambles." "They're learning," Logan added quietly from his position farther east. His tone carried no surprise, only grim acceptance. "But so are we." Jake clicked the radio once in acknowledgement, his eyes narrowing as he caught the faint shimmer of movement in the distance. His breath fogged the icy air as he exhaled slowly, adjusting his aim. He didn't fire yet. Not until he was sure. The Vraxians were adapting. Zrath had reigned in their arrogance, forcing his remaining warriors to move more cautiously, blending with the environment as best they could. Their cloaking devices flickered intermittently in the cold, but their silhouettes were harder to distinguish now, their movements more deliberate. The hunters were becoming the hunted, but they weren't giving up. Ethan's voice broke through the static again. "They're coming your way, Jake. Hold your position." Jake steadied himself, letting the forest silence wash over him. The faint crunch of snow reached his ears, a sound too heavy to be wildlife. His finger tightened on the trigger. Then he saw it, one of the Vraxians, its armor cracked and bloodstained, emerging cautiously from the trees. It moved slowly, scanning the area with its weapon raised. Jake didn't hesitate. He fired. The shot hit the alien square in the chest, the force sending it staggering backward before it collapsed into the snow. Jake didn't wait to celebrate. He rolled to his right, shifting positions before the others could lock onto him. The faint hum of an energy rifle buzzed through the air, scorching the ground where he'd just been. "Contact!" Jake hissed into the radio, his voice taut. "2 left. Closing in on my position." "Stay alive," Ethan ordered. "We're moving to flank." Jake darted behind another tree, his boots crunching through the snow. The second Vraxian appeared, its cloaking field failing as it charged forward. This one was larger, its rifle slung across its back as it drew a serrated blade, the weapon gleaming in the dim light. Jake fired again, but the creature was fast, dodging the shot and closing the gap between them. The alien lunged, its blade slicing through the air. Jake dropped his rifle and pivoted, grabbing a hunting knife from his belt. The clash was brutal and close, the Vraxian's strength far surpassing Jake's. But Jake was faster, more agile. He sidestepped another swing and drove his knife into the alien's side, the blade slipping between the cracks in its armor. The creature roared, its blood steaming in the cold. Before Jake could deliver a killing blow, the Vraxian swung wildly, catching him across the arm with its blade. He stumbled back, pain flaring as blood seeped into the snow. The alien raised its weapon again, but before it could strike, a shot rang out. The creature's head snapped back, and it crumpled to the ground. Logan emerged from the tree-line, his rifle still raised. He nodded once at Jake before stepping forward to finish the job, driving his knife into the alien's chest to ensure it wouldn't rise again. Jake exhaled shakily, clutching his bleeding arm. "Thanks," he muttered. Logan's expression remained neutral as he handed Jake a strip of cloth. "Wrap it. We're not done." The radio crackled again, Ethan's voice cutting through the static. "That's 2 down. Zrath is still out there." Connor's voice followed, more urgent this time. "I'm picking up a signal. It's him. He's heading toward the ridge." Ethan's tone hardened. "Jake, Logan, regroup at the ridge. Connor, stay on him. We end this now." The two men moved quickly, their breaths fogging the icy air as they navigated the forest. The storm was picking up again, the wind biting at their exposed skin. When they reached the ridge, Ethan was already there, his rifle trained on the tree below. Connor knelt beside him, adjusting a small device that emitted a faint hum. "He's coming," Connor said, his voice tense. "And he's bringing everything he's got." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Good. Let him." The wind carried a low, guttural roar, a sound that sent a chill down their spines. Zrath emerged from the forest, his towering form a silhouette against the snow. His armor was scorched and cracked, but he moved with unwavering purpose. In one hand, he carried his energy rifle. In the other, a massive blade that seemed to hum with energy. "You've killed my hunters," Zrath growled, his voice resonating through the cold air. Impressive for prey. Ethan stood, his rifle trained on the alien. "You came to the wrong place, Zrath. This is our land. And out here, you're not the hunter." Zrath laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Your defiance is admirable, but it ends here." The alien fired first, his energy rifle spitting bolts of light that scorched the snow and sent the humans diving for cover. Connor's device crackled, emitting a high-pitched whine as it scrambled the Vraxians' targeting systems. Zrath snarled, switching to his blade as he charged the ridge. Ethan met him head-on, firing a shot that glanced off the alien's armor before drawing his knife. The clash was brutal. Ethan's combat experience pitted against Zrath's sheer strength and ferocity. The two circled each other, trading blows as the others provided covering fire. Logan's shot hit Zrath's shoulder, causing the alien to stagger. Jake, ignoring the pain in his arm, took aim and fired again, the bullet finding a weak point in the alien's armor. Zrath roared in fury, his blade swinging wildly as he tried to fend them off. The tide was turning. Connor's device overloaded, sending a pulse of energy that disrupted Zrath's systems further. The alien's armor flickered, its shielding failing entirely. Sensing the end, Ethan lunged, driving his knife into Zrath's chest with a shout of effort. The alien stumbled, his weapon falling from his grasp as he collapsed to his knees. "You fought well," Zrath rasped, blood dripping from his mouth. "But this isn't over." Ethan stepped back, his breathing heavy as he watched the alien collapse into the snow. For a moment, none of them moved, the weight of their victory sinking in. The storm howled around them, the wind carrying away the last echoes of the battle. Jake slumped against a tree, his arm throbbing but his resolve unbroken. "Is it dead?" Logan crouched beside the alien, his knife at the ready. He prodded Zrath's body once before nodding. "It's over." Ethan exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Let's get back to the cabin. We'll regroup and figure out what to do next." The group moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the forest for any remaining threats. But the silence felt different now, not ominous, but peaceful. They had won, but the weight of what they had faced lingered. As they disappeared into the trees, the snow continued to fall, covering the battlefield in a pristine, unbroken blanket of white. The cabin stood as a fragile bastion against the unyielding winter, its walls weathered but resilient. Inside, the air was tense, heavy with the smell of burned wood and the metallic tang of blood. Jake leaned against the table, his wounded arm freshly bandaged, while Logan cleaned the remaining rifles with methodical precision. Connor sat near the fire, his face illuminated by the flickering flames as he tinkered with the alien device he'd salvaged from Zrath's corpse. Ethan stood by the window, his silhouette framed against the darkened forest. "They're coming," Ethan said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but his expression was grim. "The ship?" Connor glanced up sharply. "What do you mean, the ship?" Ethan turned to face them, his face lined with fatigue. Zrath wasn't bluffing when he said this wasn't over. His death must have triggered some kind of distress signal. "I saw the lights in the sky. Something big is descending." "Reinforcements," Jake muttered, his jaw tightening. "They're not going to let this go." Connor's hand stilled on the device. I might be able to disrupt their landing systems. If I can amplify the pulse, it could fry their navigation and force them to land away from us. Ethan nodded. Do it. Logan, rig the rest of the traps around the perimeter. Jake, you're with me. We'll scout their landing zone. Jake pushed off the table, his movement slower than usual but no less determined. Let's finish this. The two men stepped out into the biting cold, the wind howling through the trees as if the forest itself were warning them. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they moved, their rifles at the ready. Above them, the night sky was alive with movement, a faint, pulsing light cutting through the clouds. That's not a small ship, Jake murmured, his gaze fixed upward. Ethan grunted in agreement. Whatever's coming, it's bigger than Zratha's team. They're escalating. The light grew brighter, casting eerie shadows across the snow. As the two men crested a hill, they saw it. A massive alien craft descending slowly through the storm, its sleek, angular design gleaming even in the dim light. It hovered for a moment before landing in a clearing, the ground trembling under its weight. Ethan signaled for Jake to hold position. They crouched low, watching as a ramp extended from the ship's belly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the figures emerged, taller and more heavily armored than the Vraxians they had faced before. These were elite hunters, their movements precise and deliberate. At their center was a towering figure, even larger than Zrath, its armor adorned with intricate markings that glowed faintly in the dark. Jake's breath caught. That must be their commander. Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on his rifle. And this is their last chance to prove they're the hunters. Let's make sure they fail. The two men retreated carefully, the storm swallowing their tracks as they made their way back to the cabin. Inside, they found Logan and Connor waiting, their expressions grim but resolute. Connor had set up a small array of wires and circuits on the table, the alien device at its center. It's ready, Connor said. When they get close enough, I can trigger a pulse that'll disable their tech. But it won't last long. Ethan nodded. That's all we need. Logan, the traps. Set and ready, Logan replied, his voice steady. If they try to flank us, they'll regret it. Ethan looked around the room, his gaze lingering on each of them. This is it. We've pushed them this far, and now they're throwing everything they have at us. They think they can break us because they have better weapons, better armor. But they don't know what it means to fight for survival in this place. Jake smirked, despite the tension. They're about to learn. The group moved into position, the cabin now fortified with traps and makeshift defenses. The storm intensified, the wind howling as snow whipped through the air, reducing visibility. The humans used it to their advantage, blending into the environment as they waited for the enemy to approach. The first sign of the hunters came in the form of a faint, high-pitched hum. Connor's device sparked to life, its display blinking rapidly. They're close, he whispered. Get ready. The hum grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of armored boots on snow. Through the storm, the humans could see the faint glow of the hunters' armor as they moved in formation, their weapons raised. The commander stood at the center, his massive frame cutting an imposing figure as he barked orders in a guttural, alien tongue. Ethan waited until they were within range before giving the signal. Logan triggered the first trap, a propane tank rigged with explosives. The blast tore through the storm, sending snow and debris flying. Two of the hunters fell, their armor scorched and broken. The humans opened fire, their shots precise and relentless. Jake's rifle barked as he took down another hunter, the alien's body crumpling into the snow. Logan's traps continued to spring, ensnaring the enemy and slowing their advance. The commander roared in fury, raising a massive energy cannon that unleashed a beam of searing light. It cut through the trees, forcing the humans to scatter. Connor ducked behind a snowbank, frantically adjusting his device. I need more time, he shouted. Ethan and Jake provided cover, their shots drawing the hunters' attention away from Connor. The commander, realizing the humans were more formidable than expected, charged forward, his massive blade gleaming as he closed the distance. Ethan met him head-on, his knife flashing as he parried the alien's first strike. The clash was brutal, the commander's strength nearly overwhelming. But Ethan fought with a ferocity born of survival, his movements calculated and precise. Jake fired at the commander's flank, the bullets chipping away at the alien's armor. Connor's device emitted a sharp whine, followed by a burst of energy that rippled through the air. The hunters' weapons faltered, their energy-based systems flickering and failing. The commander stumbled, his blade dimming as the pulse disrupted its power source. "Now!" Ethan shouted. Logan emerged from the shadows, his rifle aimed directly at the commander's exposed chest. The shot rang out, hitting the alien squarely and sending him staggering back. Ethan seized the moment, driving his knife deep into the commander's abdomen. The alien roared, a sound that echoed through the storm before he collapsed into the snow. The remaining hunters faltered, their cohesion broken without their leader. Jake and Logan picked them off one by one, their shots precise and unrelenting. When the last hunter fell, the forest grew silent once more, the storm's howling wind the only sound. Ethan stood over the commander's body, his breath visible in the freezing air. He wiped the blood from his knife before sheathing it, his gaze sweeping the battlefield. "It's over," he said quietly. Connor slumped against a tree, his face pale but triumphant. "We did it." Jake sat heavily on a fallen log, his injured arm hanging limply at his side. "They came here thinking we were easy prey," he said, his voice laced with exhaustion. "They didn't count on us fighting back." Logan knelt beside one of the fallen hunters, inspecting its weapon. "They'll think twice before coming here again." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let's make sure they don't. We'll destroy the ship, leave nothing behind for them to recover." The group moved methodically, gathering supplies and rigging the alien ship with explosives. As the first rays of dawn broke through the storm clouds, they stood together, watching as the ship erupted into a fiery inferno. The blast echoed through the valley, sending a plume of smoke rising into the sky. They turned away, their steps heavy but their spirits unbroken. The forest had become their battlefield, their survival a testament to their resilience. As they made their way back to the cabin, they knew the fight was far from over. But for now, they had won,